Okay, we're gonna get started. Just so you guys know, we are recording today, but it only shows the speaker's face, so it won't show anybody else who's on the call. So it just shows whoever one of us is speaking at the time. Just as a reminder, we are asking everyone to keep their microphones off. It's up to you whether you want to keep your video on or off. And if you have questions, you can put them into the chat box. It'll go directly to SCFMC moderator, and she'll take care of getting those questions to us. So for today, we're gonna start out, and we'll all introduce ourselves in a moment, and then talk a little bit about kind of the state of where the courts are at, both here in San Diego and Orange County. And then we'll kind of open up to questions and kind of talk about some of the more common issues that we've seen coming up in mediations, both with people who are maybe already divorced as well as those who are in the middle of the process. So I'm Amanda Singer. I'm a co-owner of San Diego Family Mediation Center, as well as California Family Mediation Center up in Orange County, and work full-time as a family mediator. Jen, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Jen Segura, also co-owner of San Diego Family Mediation Center and California Family Mediation up in Orange County. Strictly work as a family mediator as well. And David.
Hello, my name is David Dowling. I'm another co-owner of the California Family Mediation Center. I'm based solely here in Orange County. Excited to meet you all today. I also teach part-time for the Strauss Institute at Pepperdine. And so that's kind of my background, but I am strictly a mediator.
Great. And Jen and I are also actually CDFAs, so Certified Divorce Financial Analysts. So we may talk about some financial questions as well on today's webinar. So a little bit, we'll start off with what's going on here in the San Diego courts. So the presiding judge did a webinar yesterday to talk a bit about the state of the court. So we do have a little idea of, a little better of what's kind of going on. So at this point, the court has, they said, over 48,000 cases overall. So civil, criminal, all of the cases, all of the courts that are going to need to be rescheduled. So in the past, how many weeks have we been closed now? About 6-7 weeks. They have already have that many cases that are going to need to be rescheduled. Of that, over 9,000 are family law cases. And so really what that means, unfortunately, is it is going to be very busy, right? Once the courts reopen, they have a lot of hearings, a lot of trials, a lot of different things that need to be rescheduled. And although it says that they said they're starting to reschedule things, part of the issue is kind of an unknown on exactly when they're opening. So as of now, they're rescheduled to open Tuesday. I believe it's May 26th. The 25th is Memorial Day. So basically the courts are saying they're closed through the 22nd, and then they would reopen on the next court day. That being said, nothing's final until it actually happens, but they are looking at, here in San Diego, at least, ways to do some things in the interim. At this point, though, they're not taking any new filings. They're not open for that. Really, the way that the presiding judge put it is every day is like a Sunday. And that's partly because if they open up, they can't have their workers on holidays, things like that. For family law, in San Diego, they're working on implementing e-filing, at least to hopefully be in place when the courts reopen, but they will also still take stuff over the counter, it sounds like. They are working on a reduced workforce. It sounded like about 30 to 40% of the clerks that have been working. And so what they've been doing is they've been working on getting current on all of the paperwork that was there already. So for our clients or for people in the middle of divorce, that could be things like if your petition was there, if your judgment and your settlement agreement was there. And it sounds like they've gotten current on everything, but they're not nothing will actually have a filed as of date until the courts reopen. So we won't actually get anything back from the courts, and they'll all have that date on it. But the good news from that is we were really concerned that there's going to be a huge backlog of not only, when they reopened, but from everything that had been there. So it does sound like they're at least working on some of that, and they'll get that. Those will be filed. So hopefully when we start to submit new judgments, it won't be taking 3 times as long, because they have that cleared. Jen, is there anything to add for San Diego?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that was pretty much everything. They, did say again that any orders that are in place stay in place. Anything that people can agree to outside of a court order, people can agree to. But I mean, we're all kind of at their mercy right now as far as doing anything that requires a judge's signature.
Yeah.
Oh, and the emergency stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
they are
So
doing the emergency stuff.
Yeah. So they've always been taking DV restraining orders. So if that is a concern of anyone, that is always still open. And then they're taking, as Jen said, emergency or ex parte hearings. Although as I hear and I've seen on the listserv, they are very limited. So it needs to really be a true emergency. But there is that. David, what's going on up in Orange County? I think things might be similar, but maybe a little different.
Yeah, I mean, right now what I'm hearing is that, so the anticipated opening date for the court is June 2nd. So they'd said kind of like June 1st, that's a Monday. So really taking things in on June 2nd. I just talked to a friend who's an attorney up here, and she had mentioned that, that first couple of days, really they're just going to be bringing attorneys in to kind of get a status and understanding of where the cases are, because so many cases were filed kind of in the process somewhere along the journey. They do anticipate that it is going to take longer for cases to get processed because of this backlog. So we have e-filing here in place in Orange County already, which is great, and it's great to be able to utilize that. And so the courts already have that in place. So I think that will really benefit people moving forward. But I do anticipate, and we do expect that, every other department is on hold too. So when the courts open back up, there's going to be a need for services to be evenly distributed, and they might be pulling judges into other departments to deal with things like criminal cases. I talked to a friend of mine who's a DA, and he anticipates that there's going to be a huge backlog of criminal cases. As you already pointed out, down in San Diego, where there are domestic violence cases, where there are DV situations, the court is trying to handle those. But we also anticipate and expect that when the court opens up, that's going to be those urgent cases are going to be the first thing that they take care of. So utilizing services like, mediators, private judges, whatever it might be, will be something that divorce cases are going to have to do looking forward for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely, David. I think that's very important is, as much as we can clear out of the courts too, through mediation, private judges, things like that, will allow the issues that really need to be heard to be able to be heard quicker too. So I think that's very important. Other thing is, for those of you who may be working with an attorney, at least here in San Diego, they did talk about not even really opening up for in-person hearings. They're going to be doing everything through I think it's MS Teams. So, in addition to, the hearings, they're going to be done differently. And so, they've said to attorneys and even as clients needing to get comfortable with using MS Teams, because that's what you're going to be doing hearings on. Orange County, might be a little bit different, but that's something that they have talked about down here. David, I don't know if they've mentioned anything like that for Orange County using video.
Yeah, I haven't heard that directly myself, but I anticipate, the courts are going to do whatever they can to, make resources available. When you consider the size and scope of what's going on right now, it's across the world, it's across the country. And so what we've got is, it's an unprecedented situation that the courts are finding themselves in. that everything is closed, everything is on hold. So when things open up, I think patience is the key word here. I think we're all going to have to be patient with the courts and understand, we in our jobs, we have clients that come in and we file their stuff with the court, and we always tell clients, we got to be patient, and the court will process the paperwork when they get to it. What we're dealing with now is something that nobody's ever seen before or experienced before. So really anybody who's going to go through this process needs to understand that, we need to take any expectations that we have had previously and kind of push those expected return deadlines out significantly so that we can allow the courts to do the work that they need to do. We've got court staff that are going to be inundated. They're going to be buried in work. And as already discussed, so many other departments, criminal departments that are more urgent than, certain cases will be heard first.
Yeah. And I do see that we have a question. So the question being, with the courts being closed, does it extend the final court date for divorce? We've not finalized our mediation agreement to submit to the court yet. Jen, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I don't even see where the question came.
She's sending them individually. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, as far as we know, yes. And, I mean, there's a chance that the court will backdate things. It is our best guess. They probably won't. I mean, I don't know, Amanda, what you think about that, but I mean, my guess is they're not going to backdate them. And so what that means, and, I had a client this morning text and say, what does all this mean for our April final date? And, the answer is, I mean, we have some things that we filed with the court that we never got back before the court closed down. And so, I mean, they're trapped at the court until the court reopens. So basically, we're not going to be able to promise anything as far as when anything will be final. All we have right now are assumptions. Honestly, I think the judges couldn't even tell us when and where and how things will be handled, because they don't even know what's going to be the best and most efficient way to do this. I mean, I did get yesterday, it sounded like they were going to start working on backlog stuff that's already there. I don't know. Is that what they said?
No, what I heard, I think, is correct, is that they've already worked on it. So because they have a small amount of the workforce there, they have. So if you already filed your mediation agreement and your final judgment in San Diego, it sounds like the courts have worked on it and processed through everything, but there's not going to be a file date on it until the courts reopen. So for example, if the courts do reopen on May 26th, even if your agreement was there and maybe a judge they processed it on April 1st, it's not going to be stamped until May 26th. So that would affect like your client asking about their April date. I think I agree with you, Jen, and when with this question about if you haven't finalized your mediation agreement and submitted it to the court yet, part of it depends on when is your 6-month date up. Right? If your 6-month date is going to be up, in the beginning of June, well, I think it is highly unlikely that you're going to be final at that 6-month date. If your 6-month date is still out in September, we don't know. I mean, it's possible that they could, get through those quickly and they could do them. I think just like, I agree with you, Jen, I don't think that they're necessarily going to backdate things. I think we have to operate under the assumption they won't. And then if they do, well, then that might be nice. But I think that the other part of it is just how long, we don't know how long it'll take once they do reopen. And so, I think the important thing is talking with your mediator, talking with your attorney. If there are certain orders that are more urgent, finding a way to sometimes those can be done, right? So we've got clients sometimes who are looking to take money out of a retirement account, and sometimes those quadros, we can do it on an ex parte basis. So there may be some ways, but again, keeping in mind, is it really a true urgent issue or not?
Yeah, I mean, from what they said yesterday,
I would say
Go ahead.
Go on.
No, I was just gonna say, from what I understood from what they said yesterday, as far as emergencies go, quadros right now are not going to be considered emergencies. It's really more life and limb that they're worried about. Like, is there danger physically to anybody? And aside from actual physical danger, they're not considering it an emergency. Once they open back up, we may be able to get more things done. But also, and I mean, this does kind of fall under what we do as well, but there are, under the CARES Act, there are options for withdrawing money from your own retirement account right now without a penalty. If anybody is interested in learning more about that, please feel free to reach out to us. Probably more than I can go into right here would take up the rest of the session. But there are options right now for people to get to their own money right now in their retirement accounts without that penalty, which is what we get to do with Quadros. So, I mean, that's something to consider. But one other thing that I've been telling clients is, if you have started your mediation and maybe you're a session in or whatever the case may be, as much as possible, we're trying to get these mediations wrapped up and done and in judgment form so that the day the court does open, we can submit them all. Doesn't mean that they're going to go quickly, but I have to imagine that if your judgment is submitted, May 26th, you're going to get it back a lot quicker than if your judgment is submitted in June or July, because that first huge influx of cases, it's going to be a lot.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing I talked about patience is understanding flexibility, because, we are living in this time where so many people, if somebody's giving you definitive answer, I say run from them, because there's no definitive answers right now. We really are uncertain. If you're anticipating or planning and thinking about filing for a divorce, going the route of mediation might be your best option, because while the court is closed, we can get you in, get all of the paperwork done, actually get your mediation sessions kind of taken care of, so that, as Jen already pointed out, we can get you leaps and bounds ahead of waiting for the court to open and then starting the process. So although the court is not open, we are still working with clients right now. We are getting everything resolved. We're doing things like the parenting plan and the spousal support, child support, division of assets. We're kind of lining all of those details up for our clients, able to put together that marital settlement agreement, the final paperwork, so that the packets are ready to go out when the court does open. It's not that we then, as Jen just pointed out, anticipate that it'll take 6, 8, 10 weeks, whatever it might be. But if we can get everything in, we can get you at the start of that line, or at least somewhere in a good position to get your divorce resolved sooner rather than later. So just think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing I would say is, even thinking outside of the courts, we know that this is a difficult time for everyone, no matter what kind of situation you're in right now. And so, being stuck in that limbo of maybe, as Jen mentioned, having started your mediation, but not having finalized things, it can be helpful to work through that, even if you are living together in the same house, even if it's hard because, you've got to work around when the kids have, virtual e-learning and, when they're around and stuff. But being able to get some stuff in place, oftentimes I really feel like sometimes clients feel like the hardest time is when you're in it, because there is that unknown. And so you've got the unknown of what's going on in the world right now, right? And then the unknown of what's going on in your divorce or your marriage. And so being able to maybe finalize some of those things and help you move forward can oftentimes help with some of that stress. And so thinking about that, and so if you're in mediation already, if you have an attorney, speaking with your attorney about mediation, right? I mean, we know some wonderful attorneys that are very pro mediation and are really on top of that, but unfortunately not all attorneys are always going to be. And so letting them know, if you're working with an attorney and you're saying, hey, what are our other options right now? That can be something to bring up with them as well. So we do have a question. It's kind of a long one. I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit on it, but kind of asking, and then we can all chime in, Jen and David on that. So saying that, we have a premarital agreement, this person had all of the assets and he had none, had a condo before marriage, sold it and bought a house, signed an interspousal transfer deed, and then there was some credit card debt, handed the title over, and then deeded the house back. So it sounds like there's been some back and forth on that. And now coming back and saying that he didn't mean to sign the deed, even though it was prepared and notarized. And so asking about the house is mine. I mean, there's kind of more to it than we can really answer than I would say we could answer in this forum. The first thing being, what does your premarital agreement say, right? If you have a premarital agreement, what does it say about the property? And then beyond that, kind of understanding better what has happened throughout. We're happy to, if you want to reach out to us directly, one of us would be happy to answer that, in potentially more of a private setting. I think it's kind of too much information. I don't know if either of you want to add anything else that I didn't think of. But that's kind of what I would say initially.
Yeah,
Go
ahead.
Sorry, go on, Jen.
No, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, there's just so much that an answer would take into account, and definitely looking at the premarital agreement would be a huge piece before we could say for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because the one thing we don't want to do is give you an answer in here when we don't have all the facts and pieces of information gathered together. The last thing we want to do is kind of set you on a course where you feel like you've got a clear answer and understanding, and then there's additional information that's brought in that we're not aware of right now that can significantly impact this. So as Amanda and Jen just pointed out, if you want to reach out to any of us, depending on where you're based, we'd be happy to meet with you and kind of talk through some things or give you a better understanding of what might be the outcome here.
We talk to both of you, I mean, some of it really ultimately, if the two of you can sit down and talk together and come up with something that both of you can agree to, that would be the best outcome.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have specific questions right now. So I thought maybe we'd, and Rachel, you can send us anything that there is, and people, feel free to send the moderator questions. But one of the things maybe we talk about a little bit, I think you guys are both seeing this as well, and I know I've started to see this with clients, is the issues of support that are coming up, right? So if people have lost jobs, if there's been, reduction in pay, things like that. And so kind of what the child support and spousal support, what that's looking like, and kind of how that's playing out in both cases that have already had support orders, and then those that may be kind of in the middle of it. I don't know, Jen, David, have you guys seen that with clients? I know I've seen that with some.
I haven't had actually anybody reach out for modification because of being furloughed or loss of job yet. I have had people reach out just kind of for their annual check-in, and just due to some changes in income, but nothing related to COVID yet, which I'm very surprised. But I think that a majority of our clients are either working from home and able to still earn their money, or maybe with unemployment or a combination of both. There hasn't been as much of an impact, it seems, to our clients, because I expected a lot more. I did.
Yeah. I think one thing I would say, and I heard this when I was talking with someone yesterday about the idea that for people who may have been laid off at the very beginning, unemployment, if I remember correct, is 8 weeks or so in California. I could be wrong, maybe it's a little longer, but and especially that extra $600, I think, is only for 8 weeks, right? The $600 extra through the first stimulus payment.
It's through the end of July.
So, well, I guess it depends on when you started getting it.
Okay.
Because it's for a certain amount of time. So I think it's 8 weeks, 8, maybe 12. And so kind of for people, they may not, it might not be an issue that's come up yet, right? So if they got laid off and they're receiving unemployment, and especially receiving the $600 extra a week, I think for some people, their income might even be a little bit higher than it was before. And so it might not be that the issue has come up on modifications for support, but I think that you're going to see more of it when unemployment starts to run out, if they don't have jobs yet, and that comes up. David, what about you?
Well, I was going to say, we just got a question in here that I'm reading right now, and it says, I'm laid off, but still required to pay child support. I can't modify because the courts are closed. What do I do? I think, understanding, everybody's in this situation right now, and I think everybody should be respectful of what's happening. I think one of the things that you can do is, even though the courts are closed and it's difficult to go back and modify, kind of going back to the previous question about, sitting down together, either having a conversation with the other parent, with the other spouse, and trying to explain to them about your current financial situation, seeing if they're willing to work with you right now. Like don't ever underestimate the ability to have a conversation and say, look, I've been laid off. Can we work with something? Can we adjust, what the support amount is because of the current crisis and the current economic downturn? If that fails, then certainly I would use the services of a mediator. If you want, reach out, talk to one of us and see if we can give you any tips or help, or if we can meet with both of you and help you to adjust some things, so then we can recalculate what support will be. So when the court opens up, it's easier to modify it, but you're both on the same page. Because one of the issues that can come up in saying to somebody, me saying to an ex-wife, look, this is my financial situation, can you take less, is trust, right? Because overwhelmingly, she might have trust issues and think, well, I'm not sure that that's what you should be paying me. So coming to a third party neutral that can do those calculations and kind of say, look, here's what support is under the current circumstances, might actually open the way for that change in support. So I would think about doing that, because if you have the relationship, some of my clients have that relationship, they talk to each other, and when one person says, look, this is how I've been impacted financially, the other's going to say, I get it, I understand it, let's work something out. If that's not your circumstance, then certainly come talk to us. We'll set up an appointment with both of you and recalculate support and give both of you an understanding of where it would be with your current financial picture.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to bring up as well is the idea of retroactivity. So we understand there are going to be some situations where, unfortunately, the two options that David brought up, neither of those are going to work, right? You guys can't figure it out on your own, and maybe they're not willing to do mediation, at least at this time. And so one of the things that came out from the state, and we do actually have a blog article on our San Diego website just recently about this, is that during this time, because the courts are closed, which I know that this question asked as well, it can't, usually when you file a request for order to modify support, your retroactivity for that amount can go back to the date that it was filed. However, because you can't file anything right now, what we've seen is that the retroactivity can go back to the date that it was just provided to the other party. So served in the sense that mail or electronic service right now is okay as well, but that they're given a copy of it, and then once the courts reopen, you'll file that RFO, and then you will need to reserve, I believe, the other person with the filed copy. But that's something that's important if you're concerned that your spouse maybe isn't going to work with you on this. You may want to talk with, and we can talk with you more about it, or talk with an attorney about completing that RFO so that you can maintain the retroactivity. So I just wanted to point that out, because for some people, that can be really important and an issue if you're not thinking about it now.
Got another question in.
Great. Oh, I see it now. Let's see. So my ex-spouse is not social distancing, and I'm scared to send my child over for visitation. Can I keep my child away from the other parent until they start socially distancing? That is a good question, and one that's come up often.
Yeah.
A tough one. I think I'll just start with the first response, just so that we're clear. Like Jen said before, is that all of your current orders do stay in effect, right? So that's the first thing, is that we don't want to tell anyone don't abide by those. That being said, understand that there can be issues. Jen, do you want to take it, or David?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, because you have to balance between, we do have an order, this is what the order says. The courts, because I'm sure they don't want to find themselves in a situation where they're giving any wiggle room for people to not abide by their orders, because it's a slippery slope. As soon as you say, okay, well, yeah, of course, if they're putting your child at risk, then don't worry about it. You don't have to follow the order, because then that's just going to take on a whole new life of its own, and no orders are going to be covered or followed. So I think it's difficult. I think it is, as a parent, I can't imagine having to send my children somewhere where I really truly am feeling that it's going to be dangerous for them to be at that place. and balancing that with the fact that how are we going to penalize people who maybe they're not social distancing because they're a nurse or a doctor or a fireman or a policeman. You know, they're out there risking their lives, and it's terrible to penalize them and take their kids from them because of that, and also balance it with, we want to keep our kids safe. And I think this question, along with nearly everything that's out there right now, it comes back to communication. And perhaps you haven't had great communication with your spouse. Maybe you went through a very, tumultuous divorce, and so the thought of trying to sit down and talk seems like there's no way to make that happen. I mean, right now, again, unprecedented times, that's really your only option, is to sit down and talk. And if you guys can't do it together, although for a lot of our clients, Zoom is not their preferred way for us to all meet. The one positive about that is if you do feel uncomfortable sitting in a room with your spouse or your ex-spouse or co-parent, Zoom gives you the ability to, kind of be in a room, but not have to physically be in the room. So, definitely for anybody out there who that other spouse is somebody on the front lines dealing with all of this, healthcare workers, we are offering an hour of free mediation time to help deal with some of those issues. So if you have somebody and that is the situation, please reach out to us, because we are willing to give you an hour of free time to talk about that and see if we can get you to a better conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one thing that I would say is, think about that other person. Like, I mean, it can be difficult when you've had a difficult divorce and there's no trust. And we see this time and time again. There's no trust in the relationship, but you have to anticipate or hope that the other person is going to put the safety of your children first. And so, although they might be engaging in some activities that you're aware they're not practicing social distancing, they're connecting with other people, whatever it might be, we would hope that they would put the safety of their children, because they are also their children, that they will put that ahead of their own needs. So having a conversation with them or sitting down with the mediator. But you have to remember that court orders do, as Amanda and Jen have said, do remain in place. And that other person, the other spouse, does want to see the children. So if you've already had a conversation, and obviously, you just messaged us this question, I'd love to know, have you had a conversation with that person? Have they kind of said, don't care? What's been their attitude when you've brought it up to them? But I do think that you need to remember that they are the other parent, and they do have rights to see the child or children as well. So
I think the thing too, and I recently had a new co-parents that I met with for a few hours just on this issue, actually. And I think that, one of the things I talked about with both of them is how you approach it and why you're having the conversation, right? So in this situation, I think that one of the parents felt that it was more of a control and a way to control her from from who she's seeing or what she's doing, as opposed to if you address it as it's the concern for the kids and maybe for yourself if you are at high risk, or if maybe you have someone in your household who's at high risk. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that I always will talk about, is it's a lot of times it's how you bring that conversation up, because if you bring it up as, well, you're not doing what you should be, and it just, that becomes blaming, right? That is where they're just going to probably get defensive and feel like you are trying to maybe control their actions, as opposed to can you make sure they understand why you're having these concerns, right? So I think that that's something to think about too, is when you have that conversation, how are you doing that, and doing it in a way. And that's where I think we as mediators really come into play well, is that we help with that, and we allow that neutral third party to help you guys with the conversation. But if you're doing it on your own, just think about how you're broaching the conversation, always focusing on the kids, and imagine that you guys can you agree that you both want what's going to be best and safest for the kids, and then kind of go from there. We did have another question that came in. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Either you want to add about the last question? Okay. So suspect that my spouse is talking to other people on online dating sites during this lockdown. Can I get started on my divorce even though the courts are closed? Yes, you definitely can. The only thing we can't do at this time is actually legally file to be able to get that petition in, but we can start everything else. I think Jen was saying before, we can do the mediation sessions, we can meet, I've got a couple that I started with since the courts closed. We've gone through all of our sessions. I'm in the process of drafting their settlement agreement. We'll have everything together and ready to go, most likely before the courts even open. And then, like Jen said, we will get your paperwork ready to go so that when the courts do open, then it's ready and we're able to file that right away. But you can definitely get started. We don't have to wait. And like we said before, for some people, that's just not possible waiting. We understand that.
Yeah. I think that, you're not alone in this. There's actually, this question has come up before for us where, people find themselves in a home isolated with a spouse who is on dating apps. It seems to be something that's occurring quite a bit right now. And so one thing, that I love about this webinar that we're doing, this series that we're doing, is being able to connect with people and let them know you can start this process, you can get your divorce going, you can kind of feel a sense of moving forward and looking forward instead of feeling isolated and stuck in the relationship and where things are right now. And so why not take advantage of it? We can do a consult with both of you. Our consultations are free of charge, so we can meet with both of you, kind of get a sense of what's going on and what your goals are, and then see if this is the right format, if working with us is the best way forward. But as Amanda and Jen have both pointed out, we can actually get just about everything done and then wait for the courts to open and then get everything filed for you, and you'll be ahead of the curve on this.
Yeah, it's very true. And David, I think you're right. I've heard that question from more than one person. I think that the online dating has kind of come up, and maybe is harder because you're both home together all the time and seeing it. We talked about this, I think, on another webinar we did, but one of the things too is if that's something that kind of is causing a rub between the two of you, is maybe a discussion of when that happens, right? That's something you can do on your own time, but asking maybe not to do in front of you, especially not in front of the kids if there are kids around, and just kind of that respecting of, if you're living together, respecting each other's space, especially since we're all in the same space, 24/7 for the most part these days. Yeah, I know we had another question. Looking for recommendations in divorcing my partner with narcissist/challenging behaviors. And we do see that often. Imagine it'll be trickier to go through a mediator, even though that's what they both initially agreed to. No formal filing has been done yet. Well, so I'll give one recommendation to start. Bill Eddy has a book called Splitting: Protecting Yourself While Divorcing Someone with Borderline or Narcissistic Personality Disorder. Would definitely recommend that book to anyone. He's got some great information and advice on how to deal with somebody in that process. So that's one thing that I would start with that can be helpful. I'll hand it over to one of you if you want to. Jen, I know you've had a lot of couples that may have had similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the area we live in, it does tend to draw a lot of personality types like that. And I'd almost say nearly every couple has somebody in there that has some traits. It's a spectrum, and there's some people that are very narcissistic, and then there's some people that just maybe some traits are there, but they're not a full-blown narcissist. But yes, we are definitely well equipped to handle narcissistic personalities. When we are in the office and working, and we can certainly do it through Zoom as well, we will have a one-on-one with each one of you. And in that one-on-one, we talk about things like this, like, are there any personality issues that we should be aware of? And, could be narcissism, it could be PTSD. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there that people are struggling with. And so we will talk through some of our processes that we put in place for dealing with people with different personality disorders. We are very aware that, people that carry that narcissistic trait, they don't know always that they carry that trait, or definitely won't ever see that they carry that trait. So there are special ways to handle those situations, and something that we are very comfortable doing at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing to remember is, because for a lot of people in your situation, they're thinking, look, this person doesn't listen to me, they're not going to listen to anybody else. And so what you have to understand and remember is that's what we're trained to do, is we're trained to work with individuals on a broad spectrum, as Jen just pointed out. A lot of behaviors that you experience in the marriage might seem exacerbated or exaggerated in the marriage, but when that individual is around somebody else, they might not show in the same way. And so it might be easier for a neutral, a mediator like us, to handle that behavior and to help you navigate your divorce than you anticipate. And also remembering the thing that we kind of started this whole conversation with right now, which is, the courts are going to be inundated with cases, with divorces, and a lot of these cases are going to be funneled into mediation. So you're going to probably see a mediator at some point. And so starting the process on the right and kind of trying to say to this person, let's try to work this out, might be a better approach than going out and trying to litigate it and still ending up back in the same place with the mediator. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah. The other thing I would always say is if you have any concerns and feel like maybe you do need an attorney, or you need whether both of you do, or you need a consulting attorney, there are ways, like, we want you to know that it's not just litigation or mediation without attorneys. There are ways to, whether you retain an attorney or whether you have a consulting attorney, to make sure that you have somebody giving you that advice if you feel like maybe you need that, extra piece of it. And so even if you end up feeling, okay, maybe we both need attorneys at this point because of how he's acting or whatever it is, you can still mediate, right? Like we've talked about. And so, yes, it might take some more time, and yes, the process will be more expensive having both, but it's definitely going to still be less time and less cost than if you end up litigating the whole process. And so I think it's important to know that it's not a black and white. There are ways, and maybe there are some issues that you find you don't need your attorney present for, but there's others that you do. And that's we really will work with you on any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have another question.
Yeah.
I think it's all one question, or are they separate questions? Okay.
I think this is all one question.
Okay. I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit as we ask and answer it. But question about feeling at peace giving other spouse half custody and no child support. After a year and a half, feel ready to finalize it. But sounds like you'd have to pay spousal support and child support if we go to court. Other spouse is self-employed and saying that this person has the higher income. Would bank records from the time he left be enough proof to show he was making more, and any benefit even if he's not making as much now? Not sure to keep moving forward or just get it done. So as we've said with kind of most of the questions, it's tough for us to answer completely because we're clearly missing some information. So we want to kind of provide what we can, but know that we would need more to give a much better answer. That being said, I think the first part is, it depends on everyone, on your situation. What is each of your income? What does the, custody, you say half custody. So if you guys are sharing 50-50, what does that look like? In California, child support, there's a guideline amount of child support based on income and based on timeshare. Now, you guys can agree to something different if there's a reason to, but you could never waive child support. Child support actually belongs to the child or children, not to each of the parents. And so, it could be that you agree because based on the numbers that there isn't any child support, but being aware of what that guideline amount is. I know you mentioned his lawyer. I don't know if you have a lawyer or if you have anyone you've spoken with, but I think sometimes that can be helpful because you have to remember his lawyer is looking at this from the, best perspective. From his perspective, he's going to look at it and say, well, this is what you could get. This is what it would look like. So if you haven't already, I would certainly recommend talking with, an attorney as well, and or mediator to see, understand better what your rights are. asking about the bank. Jen, do you want to take that or?
Yeah, I mean, so when we have somebody who's self-employed or self-supporting or 1099, anything that isn't a straight W-2, there are definitely ways to go about figuring out what is the actual income. You can go really drastic and do forensic accounting to figure that out. It can be very costly, but even, with your mediator or CDFA, you can sit down and just kind of look through and see, well, how is money flowing in and out of your account, right? Like, what is the rental or your mortgage? What are you paying for your car payments? What are you paying for groceries? So it's just kind of putting together an overall view of, well, what's the lifestyle been? What have you guys been able to afford to pay for without going into significant debt or other things like that? But there are ways to come up with a better idea of what the income actually is rather than just looking at taxes. It's not a secret that people who are self-employed or have their own business or whatever the case may be, that they're always going to try and skirt around showing all of their income to the IRS so they can pay less money in taxes. So there's nobody that works in this field that isn't aware of that. And it sounds like you guys do each have attorneys right now. I would definitely ask, what have we done to look and see what his income actually is, both at the time of separation and now. And if his income was one thing at the time of separation and it's significantly different now, then the question would be, well, why is it significantly different? Is that a voluntary action that he did that made his income less because he's trying to make himself look like he's earning less? Is it something, is it related to COVID? Is it related to, is he a financial planner? Is it related to the market shift? So I think there are a lot of other factors that would help us to help you determine, is it time to just walk away? I mean, you also have to balance it all with the price of peace. I mean, a year and a half into a litigated divorce is emotionally and physically exhausting. How much money are you paying for your attorney right now to keep fighting this for you? What kind of toll is it taking on your co-parenting relationship, on your relationship with your kids? Why are you focusing so much of the time to that? Or are you focusing so much of your time on the divorce that you're losing sight of the things that are more important, like your children, your relationship with them, moving forward, increasing your own income, whatever the case may be. So I think everything at all times needs to be balanced against that price of peace. And at some point, if you feel like, yeah, I'm done, that's okay. You don't have to keep fighting to get the best deal that you possibly can. If you're ready to say, hey, this works for me, I can afford this, I'm ready to move on with my life, then it's okay to do that, even if you are leaving some stuff on the table. I think that it's everybody's individual choice to make.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the question, I can see that you're saying, giving half child custody and no support versus kind of battling out the support thing. And I think that that's as Jen just pointed out, it's a decision that you have to make and kind of think about. I'm not sure if you are represented. It sounds like he is represented by an attorney. And the attorney is telling you what you need to do and what needs to happen. You should definitely talk to somebody that can kind of give you better advice on your end of things. But really, it is about, as Jen just pointed out, figuring out what your ultimate goals are. It's thinking about what matters more to you. If this person's a good dad and is going to do good things with your children, figuring out some kind of an agreement that there's an agreement on custody and you're not paying support if he's willing to do that. Amanda pointed out you can't waive support, so if he's entitled to child support, then you need to consider that. But maybe there are some things that you could agree to where you could support or pay for certain things for the children, so you don't feel like you're giving the money to him, but you're paying for certain things that the children get to do. So it's a way to kind of find a balance in there. It's a way to kind of address some of your feelings about not even wanting to give him money, You could offer to cover certain expenses associated with the children that include time when they're with him, camps, whatever it might be. So that way you're not feeling like I'm writing a check to him and I don't feel like I should be doing that. You know that the children is or that the money is going directly to your children and benefiting your children in their time with him. So that's kind of one of the things that we can talk through in mediation. We often talk through in mediation with clients where we have these disagreements here. Is it's thinking about what really matters to you and then finding out of the box solutions that can help both of you move forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if we have any other questions, but if anybody does have additional questions, remember you can send them to the SDFMC moderator. We've got probably about 5 more minutes that we, have available today. If there aren't any other questions, we'll wrap up, but we'll give a moment or two. I think we've had some great questions so far, and hope it's been helpful for you guys as well. Yeah, so we'll see if anyone else has additional questions. Right. Well, what we'll do, I don't see any yet, is maybe we'll just kind of, we'll kind of take a closing now. But if you do still have questions, feel free to send them. We can always answer some at the end. So, we thank you all for joining us today. We've been offering these webinars about once a week, just to be able to provide resources, answer questions. Like we've talked about, I think the other thing too is seeing that you may not be the only one having these questions, right? Someone else might have asked a question that you're like, wait a second, I've been dealing with the same thing. And so being able to understand, like, you really aren't alone in this, and there are other people dealing with it. It can be very, very helpful during this time. So we will be continuing to do more webinars during May as well, with some new topics and things. So check our Facebook page. We have a newsletter. If you'd like to sign up, you can go to the website to receive those and keep an eye on when those happens. We also always record them like we talked about today. So if you missed anything, you can see some of the recordings that we've done in the past as well, which are on our YouTube channel. Jen, you want to add anything to finish up?
No, I think that pretty much summarizes it. Definitely, we are always here to answer questions and help everybody through this. We know it's challenging, not only to be handling, a divorce, co-parenting, COVID, teaching your children. I know I, for one, never wanted to be a teacher, and now that's part of my life. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and it's easy to just not want to deal with it and just kind of close up. But I think, trying to take this time to get through some of these things and get on the other side of them and just really focus on, what do you want your life to look like after all of this? Because like you see, a lot of the stuff out there right now is, when can we go back to normal? And I think it is take this time to really figure out, like, well, was your normal working for you? And what might work better for you when you come out of this? I think the world's going to be a different place when we all come out of this, and hopefully it's for the better and not for the worst. But I think it applies individually as well. Like, dig inside and see what it is that you're missing, and work during this time to make it better.
David?
Yeah, I love doing these webinars. It's a lot of fun to connect with people and hear their questions. I'm looking forward to, you can probably see joining us on screen now is Swati Desai. Swati, can you wave at us? So Swati is, hi Swati. And Swati is a lawyer, a family law attorney up here in Orange County, and a good friend of ours. And so she's going to be doing one of our next webinars. She and I will be getting together and answering some questions and talking about some things from the perspective of a mediator and a family law attorney. And so we're excited that she was able to join us for this webinar. And so please join us again for our future webinars, because as kind of I'm pointing at now, each week we're going to hit on different things, introduce different guests and people from different areas of family law, divorce, that can assist you in different ways. There are only so many things that we can do in our fields as mediators. So bringing in family law attorneys, bringing realtors, bringing in financial experts that can be more specific in guiding you and answering some of your questions and pointing you to the right resources. And that's what we're here to do. So we're looking forward to carrying on these and getting to know you a little bit better. And thank you for joining us, Swati. I wanted to introduce you today.
Yes, thank you for joining.
Yeah, I'm glad, David, you told me about it this morning and I was able to get on.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you all for being here. Doesn't look like we have any additional questions, so we'll wrap up for today. And like I said, keep an eye out. We'll be getting our May and potentially June webinar schedule out shortly. So thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, guys.